Mark Carney is shaking up the Senate with his first round of appointments as Prime Minister. 4 new faces were put forward today: Tom Pitfield, Richard Martel, Rodney Ouellette, and Gita Tucker. While they're all new to the Red Chamber, not all of them are new to Ottawa. Tom Pitfield, for one, is one of Carney's most senior advisors, serving as the Prime Minister's principal secretary. And up until today, Martel was a Conservative MP for Quebec. Both, for now, will sit as independents. Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau, had implemented a policy of largely nonpartisan appointments to the Senate, but now Mark Carney is making a point of showing partisans are welcome. For more on these appointments, I'm joined by Senator Andrew Cardozo, an Ontario member of the Progressive Senate Group. Senator, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you for taking some time today.
David Cochran, thanks for having me.
I know you've written about concerns wanting to see the Senate stay independent and nonpartisan. We have some appointments here in Tom Pitfield and Richard Martel that would be partisan. What are your thoughts on those picks?
Well, you know, I think one of the main things that Prime Minister Carney has said is that he would restore the system of appointing senators, and that he would have people come through an independent advisory process. So senators will still be required to apply. The other thing he said is that they would not be members of the Liberal caucus. So those are the two main things. What we have here is one senator with a new senator with a Liberal background and one with a Conservative background. I don't think it's radically changing anything, at least not yet.
Okay, so, well, I mean, it is an unusual thing, given the last decade of Senate appointments, to have the principal secretary to the Prime Minister go right into the upper chamber. I mean, Tom Pitfield is going to sit as an independent, but I think Mark Carney can maybe count on him to vote in favor of government policy. What do you make of the decision to pluck a member from the Conservative benches in Mr. Martel, who, as of now, is also sitting as an independent rather than a Conservative?
Yeah, well, let me share with you 2 dates I looked up. So Pierre Trudeau in 1982 appointed a senator by the name of Michael Pitfield, Tom Pitfield's father, to sit as an independent. So one of the few independents, probably the only independent that Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau ever appointed. And in 1978, Trudeau also appointed Claude Wagner, coincidentally the father of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Richard Wagner, a Conservative, to sit as a Liberal. So I think that's kind of the last time a Prime Minister has appointed a member of Parliament from the opposition side, straight from the House of Commons, to sit as an independent, as a senator. But in Claude Wagner's case, he sat as a Conservative senator.
Right. So, but an interesting thing that jumps out in the announcement today is that the Prime Minister's office is making a point of saying they're removing the nonpartisanship criterion for Senate appointments. Now, Roger Cuzner's in the Senate, former Liberal MP, Sandra Pupatello, who was an Ontario Liberal cabinet minister, ran federally. They're in the Senate. So partisans have been appointed. They just don't sit in a partisan caucus when they go to the Senate. Does that language fundamentally change what's happening here?
I don't think so. I think the main thing, I mean, to be fair, when Justin Trudeau started appointing senators, he literally would not appoint people who were active Liberals in the first few years. Towards the latter part of his time, he did appoint some Liberals who had either been MPs or provincial Liberals, but they sat as independents, which means they did not caucus with the Liberal Party. The Liberal caucus didn't tell them how to vote. They didn't hand them speech notes. They didn't hand them questions. They were not involved in party affairs. They were not involved in fundraising and outreach and any of those kinds of things that senators have been appointed from involved in from Confederation right till 2015. And I think that continues in Mr. Carney's process.
So you still see this as an independent Senate, even if people from more partisan backgrounds are more likely to be appointed at scale? Because one of the things the government is saying is they need people with some political experience, maybe legislative experience, because that helps move things more effectively through the Senate. Do you buy that? Do you think this will still be an independent but maybe more efficient body?
Yeah, I would say I was looking at the words quite closely, and there's a reference to the government removing the nonpartisan criterion. There hasn't really been a nonpartisan criterion, more a tradition. But the part I thought, the words, kind of what you were saying, knowledge of governing and legislative process. I think those are really important words. And the one thing I've heard from critics of Mr. Trudeau's appointments was that there weren't enough people with a broad range of experience and broad policy experience. So somebody who's been involved in the political process has had to vote on legislation of all kinds over a period of time, whereas people who've come from a particular interest group, be that the medical field or the business field, come as specialists in a particular area. And I think this probably responds to the need to have people with a broad range of experience, because at the end of the day, we may come to the Senate with a specific set of expertise, but we still have to vote on every single bill that comes along, and we have to have some kind of knowledge about it. And what's interesting is that as an independent senator, you don't have a caucus to rely on, not just to push you to how to vote, but to guide you.
Right.
So at the end of the day, we're still totally independent. We sit in caucuses of groups that deal with the administrative aspects of the Senate, but do not guide us in terms of policy aspects. So as independent senators, I would argue we've got a bit more work than MPs, that we really have to figure out how we're going to vote.
No, that's a good point. Like if you're a doctor from Alberta, you can't just vote on Western and healthcare related legislation. You might have to deal with Atlantic crab fishery legislation, for example. And that's where caucus resources, at least for research and stuff, would be helpful. And on that point, Senator, the Prime Minister's office is also saying the recruitment of candidates will be done with an enhanced focus and expertise in strategic industries, regulatory frameworks, and emerging social and economic affairs. So we know the Prime Minister's been recruiting people with business backgrounds for the House of Commons. It seems like he's going to be looking for a bit of that for the upper chamber as well.
I think so. I mean, there's still wording like economic and social affairs, so there's still the social aspects. But I think, given the overall nature of the government, the overall, the times that we live in, the issues around trade and the economy, I think we'll benefit plenty by having people with business and industry background. Some of the, which reflect a bit of the Prime Minister's background in terms of whether it's the Bank of Canada or the private sector.
Okay, so just as a final point, we wanted to talk to you about this because you'd written about keep it independent and, wanted to stay that way. This doesn't seem to raise alarm bells yet. What would be the sort of change in approach that might get you there? Would it be inviting all senators who are willing to come back to the Liberal caucus? Would that be the sort of the red line on the shift, or is there something more subtle than that?
So I've thought about it, and there is certainly a pathway for a Liberal Prime Minister, Mr. Carney or anybody else, to have a Liberal caucus. But my guess is, so there's, he's just filled 4 vacancies. There's about another 10 coming up this year. So he's only appointed one of those 4 who's actually a Liberal. So if he appointed the next 10 to be hardcore Liberals, there may be another 5 in the Senate, maybe 10, who would actually join the Liberal caucus. That would get him to 20 or 25. That doesn't get him very far. And I would argue that you would, not to denigrate myself, but it's sort of like you would set a cat among the pigeons, and it wouldn't be worth it. It wouldn't be worth his time to do that.
Senator Andrew Cardozo, thank you for being so collegial with me today. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have a lot of respect and trust for Mr. Martel. I had the chance to talk to him again last night. At the time where we need to work together, all parties combined on national unity, it will be a pleasure for me to work with Mr. Martel.
So what signals is the Prime Minister sending with these appointments? We've got the power panel here to start with that topic. Supriya Dwivedi was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Lisa Raitt is in Calgary for Stampede, and she is a former Conservative cabinet minister. And Nathan Cullen is not in Calgary for Stampede. I don't think he is a former NDP MP and a BC NDP minister. It's good to see you all, or howdy, Lisa. Lisa, let's start with you. What do you make of these appointments? Yeah. The principal secretary, Tom Pitfield's dad was a senator, now he's a senator, and Mr. Martel from the Conservative benches. What are your thoughts?
Well, on Mr. Pitfield, all I can say is that it's not like we didn't do the same thing. So they're taking a page from the Conservative book, I guess, and appointing people who are known to them, who give good advice. I actually don't have a problem with Mr. Pitfield being appointed to the Senate. He understands politics. He He can see what is going on in the world. He can bring his advice to the common area as opposed to just in the Prime Minister's office. And I think it'd be interesting to see how he does. Mr. Martel, I think, also is quite interesting. Everybody that I'm talking to out here in Calgary is saying, wow, what a play by Mr. Carney, because here he is bringing over conservative member. He's getting another by-election and another attempt to put together yet another win for the Liberals, perhaps. We'll see if the Conservatives can hold it. And finally, Mr. Martel, I mean, there's a lot of rumors around him walking the floor and crossing over. He didn't cross the floor. He got appointed to Senate. It is a difference. And we'll see what he does in terms of his independence when he takes his seat.
But Lisa, on that, what do you make of the fact that Mr. Martel is going to sit as an independent senator and not as a conservative? Because there is a conservative caucus in the Senate, but he's going in not automatically as a conservative, but as an independent. Stack that on top of the issues you raised. What does that tell us?
Well, everybody's got to get their feet wet somehow, right? Let's see what he ends up doing in terms of, does he stay independent? Does he become a conservative? I don't know. It's really up to him. He's a good man, and he is going to do a good job in Senate. He's going to be honorable for life. I give him congratulations as well. And this is the way politics goes, folks. The Prime Minister made two strong, bold moves, and people are reacting to it.
Nathan,
although I tell you, like I said off air, I was looking for Senator Supriya, and I'm very disappointed.
Well, okay, because you name-checked her, I'll go to her. Supriya, my condolences on being passed over. What are your thoughts on this? Because, look, they do make a point in their news release, the government does, that they're doing away with the nonpartisan requirement. But, you know, Roger Kusner got appointed to the Senate. He was a partisan Liberal. Sandra Pupatello got appointed to the Senate, another partisan Liberal by the Liberals. So this has been happening. But what do you make of these two particular choices by Mark Carney?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll echo what Lisa said with respect to, you know, Tom Pitfield being an incredibly smart guy. I also am excited to see what he does in the Senate. And I take Lisa's word about, you know, Mr. Martel being a good guy as well. And I think it's an interesting move, particularly because of the by-election that it, you know, opens up. Presumably for the Liberals now, you know, trying to make inroads there. But I think, you know, if we're looking at the government news release, I'm not sure why we're all pretending that under the previous system, having past partisan affiliation was this like automatically disqualifying characteristic. Because, you know, to your point, you know, Sandra Pupatello, Roger Kusner, but there's also a very specific line in there about the, you know, the qualifications that said past political activities would not disqualify an applicant. Right. So, you know, I think the reason for the nonpartisanship and the merit-based criteria that were emphasized under the previous system was that because too many people were being appointed to the Senate solely on the basis of having had past political partisan experience. And while I'm sure other, you know, prime ministers did this as well, from my own memory under Harper, there are at least a few folks who ran as MPs, you know, lost the election and then were then appointed to the Senate in short order. And if you look at the point of the changes that were made to the Senate under Trudeau, I mean, they were arguably to restore some semblance of public trust in an institution that was increasingly seen as a place for political cronies to end up when, you know, they tired of the private sector or couldn't win an election as an MP. So, and that, you know, kind of led to senators either rubber stamping government legislation or becoming obstructionist in nature, depending on which party was in power and which senators we were talking about, which doesn't exactly lend itself to the whole sober second thought thing. So, you know, the prime minister is obviously free to make the changes however he sees fit. He is the prime minister, and this is fully within his purview. But I'm just not sure why we all have to pretend like the old days of the Senate, where senators were appointed for patronage, you know, reasons, and were mired in all sorts of scandals, was somehow the superior system.
Yeah, we bring it up today largely because it's Mark Carney's first move on this, and just it's noteworthy for that. But you're not wrong about the old Senate, and I don't say this about Fabian Manning because I've known him for a long time. But Fabian Manning was a senator who resigned from the Senate to run for Stephen Harper, lost his battle in Newfoundland and Labrador, and they got reappointed to the Senate. So he's been appointed to the Senate twice. So yes, it's always been a political partisan thing. Nathan, what are your thoughts on this? That because also in the language today is like Mark Carney says they're not going to have any qualms about political pass, but also he says he's looking for people with economic experience and focus on the development issues to try to bring that expertise to the upper chamber.
I'll be honest, I'm really trying to care in the sense of
you want to roll up the red
carpet.
carpet. I remember Nathan Cullen roll up the red carpet, right?
Okay, so yeah, that's right, with the rims. That was a good. I like that campaign. I am long enough in the memory to remember the Mike Duffy, Senator Brazeau. Like it just became a headache for the government. So Priya's right. Normally, it's just a patronage thing where you just put in friends, fundraisers, allies. They rubber stamp stuff, and it moves on. It's still unelected. It's not accountable. You're put in there for life. You give sober second thought, but don't give too much sober second thought, or then the government gets angry because you're taking too long to pass bills. What's the Senate for, and what are you trying to fix? Mr. Carney has got a sort of a one-track message, which has been working really well. It's about the economy, so he's going to put people in with economic chops. Fine. But again, for most Canadians, I mean, there are many that watch this program that are going to care deeply about the Senate, but most people going about their lives, they couldn't name 3 senators to save their lives, have very little impact on the day-to-day goings-on in the country. They amend the odd bill, but if they go too far, take too long, then the democratically elected side of the House gets upset and does a reform. But I do think it's actually just more honest. Trudeau did appoint partisans. Carney is now saying that's not a disqualifying quality. So, past elected people, Lisa, we got a shot, can maybe get into the glorious red chamber and spend our time thinking about stuff.
Well, look, yes, most Canadians, if you ask them to name 3 senators, will probably give you a version of Claude Giroux, Tim Stutzla, and Linus Ulmark, right?
And Brady.
Now that Brady's gone to Florida.
Anymore, right?
Exactly.
Right.
But look, here's Lisa got to this in her answer, but one of the consequences of this is the appointment of Conservative MP Richard Martel means another seat in the House of Commons will be up for grabs in a by-election later this year. These are all the ridings where MPs have either stepped down or said they would soon be stepping down. And this latest resignation brings the expected by-election count up to 7, with 4 in Quebec and 1 each in British Columbia, Ontario, and Saskatchewan. So, Lisa, this is going to add to this political dynamic, but Quebec has been the white whale for Conservatives to break through, hold, and grow there for election after election after election. What kind of risk is there for them having this seat put into play?
It's a really good question. I've always felt that in the case of Mr. Martel, that riding was really about him and maybe not as much as about conservatism. But we will see. This is an opportunity to run on what you believe in. There's enough seats in this mix to take real serious attention to what's going on in terms of what the parties are going to say. It's going to be hard for them to run individual bespoke campaigns in each and every one of them. So there's going to have to be some national kind of throughput. The timing of it will be interesting because, quite frankly, maybe it's going to be around October 9. Maybe it's going to be around the time of the Quebec election in the fall as well. And that stuff all gets mixed up into the discussion. So it's going to be really interesting to see how people nominate their candidates, especially the Liberals. Is Mr. Carney just going to start appointing willy-nilly, or are we going to see some grassroots? Are we just going to do central casting for this all the time? Yeah. Well, look, the Liberals have not had an open nomination since Mark Carney's been leader, I don't think. For by-elections. I'm not talking about the general election last year, but, we'll see, because we don't know yet where that's going to go. But, Supriya, this and Mr. Boulerice's seat, these are 2 Quebec seats in play in what could be a pretty dramatic year in Quebec politics with that provincial election coming up in early October.
Yeah, totally. It's huge. And I mean, I'm not sure of exactly the timing, but if Beaches East York and some of those, the other ones that you showed up on the screen, if they can all sort of be done as one kind of package, it kind of makes things a lot more interesting in terms of, where resources can be spent and where folks can go about in terms of, door knockers, volunteers, et cetera, et cetera. So like, I think will be very, the proof will be in the pudding. If some of the Carney mania, Carney honeymoon continues to extend, I think Lisa's observation with respect to she could be in particular being more of a Martel writing than a conservative writing is certainly very interesting. And I'd imagine that both the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives are going to try and find local star candidates to kind of put in there to not only to have ties with the community, but kind of have that name rec right from the jump. And I'm curious of how the Liberals will end up either nominating or, having an open nom there, because things can get kind of dicey and interesting. And I mean that in a good way, in the best kind of political way, where you're getting, grassroots folks engaged and really passionate.
Yeah, the Chicoutimi Laford, which is Mr. Martel's riding, Nathan, has been either red, dark blue, or light blue with an interregnum of orange in 2011 to 2015. but it's broadly that sort of blue vote or the Liberals, right, at play there. Just what are your thoughts on this big shakeup? I mean, 7 by-elections is quite a number in a single year.
Yeah, and like Supriya, I don't know the timing of each of them, if some of them are on the clock and need to happen within a certain amount of time, or they can be all brought together. But just talking brute politics, this is an ideal time for Carney to go. He's still got the shine on. He's Captain Canada when it comes to Alberta separatism, likely also questions around Quebec. And so if that's the consolidating issue going into a by-election, which are all weird, they all have their own color and flavor, and local candidates matter. I hope they're open nominations. I think this top-down appointment process Mr. Carney's used in these by-elections might work in the short term, but I've seen political parties do this, and over the long term, it fries your grassroots, because what's the point, right? What's the point of getting behind a candidate, getting excited, wanting to get involved and put the signs up when everything's coming out of the central shop and central casting, as Lisa said. So I think it'd be very exciting if they could, timing-wise, all come together. And for Mr. Carney, getting it too close to the Alberta vote and too close to the Quebec vote, I think that would actually be a counter narrative and not necessarily productive, because you're confusing a lot of issues all at once when you're really trying to just elect a local MP.
Yeah, he's got to calibrate that with some care. And the Prime Minister did say, I believe when he was asked about it maybe last week, that they wouldn't all be at the same time, just because some people are not going to quit till the end of the summer, some are already gone. And so the clock is different on things.